Honourable members of the House, in 1914, young British men flocked to join the military, believing that if they didn't sign up then, they would miss it, because it would be all over by Christmas. In 1939, by the end of 1939, the British press were crowing, calling the conflict the phony war, saying that Hitler had missed the bus, was the famous headline, because he hadn't attacked France soon enough, and that everything was going to work out. Well, the lesson I want you to take from this is the thing about world wars is that you often don't realize that you're in one even when it's already started. So it can be very hard to see it coming in the first place. What we on the proposition side hope to do tonight is to show everyone in this room and to make you realize that we are already well on the way to the third installment of the World War. I want to talk to you really about that one main point tonight. I want to talk to you about how world wars actually start. I want to use the history to illuminate our future and to show that what makes world wars is inflexible leaders who are too afraid not to escalate. Because world leaders may be greedy, that is true, but they are also afraid, and it is that fear that will make a third world war. I want to talk a little bit about rebuttal before we begin. Because according to Zach, if there are no nukes, then there is no World War III. Because he says that means we're not giving it our all. We're not trying our best. And if we're not using nuclear weapons, it's just not World War III. By this same theory, there was no Second World War. Because famously, both the United Kingdom and Nazi Germany had considerable stocks of chemical weapons that they never used on the battlefield, which means they never gave it their all, which means according to Zach, there's only been one world war. We'd say that's probably an unreasonable definition, and that even if a nuclear weapon is not fired, if hundreds of thousands or millions of people are dying across the world, we will call that a world war. Secondly, Zach told us that there will not be a third world war because increasingly people don't like war, and they will not accept it. We on the proposition side would question whether or not anyone has ever truly liked war. But we would say that before the Second World War, you could have said exactly the same thing. Before the Second World War, all of the European states were disarming, were actively taking their militaries apart, getting rid of their weapons. Before the Second World War, at Oxford they voted that they would not fight for king and country, which should have showed there would be no World War. Here in India, there was growing opposition to the idea of following Britain into another war with Germany, and all of the British politicians knew that. There was popular opposition to war, but war happened anyway. We say it can happen just the same in the status quo. And I can't go on any further without addressing the words that were brought to us by Pradipta, who spoke just before me. Because he says that the US president, a certain US president, campaigned on isolationism, so he will not take us to war. I will remind you that United States President Woodrow Wilson campaigned on keeping us out of the war, and then promptly led America into the First World War. Mr. Gupta also told us that this, with Russia, with Ukraine, this is a regional conflict. It is isolated. We say no. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the geopolitics that we see before us today. Because it is not just Russia separately, and China separately, and Iran separately. These are three powers who are led by leaders who we worry will escalate, who are working closely with each other and cooperating with each other. They see themselves as linked. Russia works with its allies in Russia and in Iran to sell its oil in contravention of sanctions across the world. China wants to assist Russia in winning Ukraine, so it recruits North Korean soldiers and sends them to Ukraine to fight alongside Russian troops. And Iran so much wants Russia to win in Ukraine that it sent Iranian drone operators and Iranian drones to help the Russians fight in Ukraine, because Iranian drones are better than Russian drones. So they wanted to assist them with that. These are interconnected allies. It is not regional. If the war begins in one place, it will carry on in all of them, and it will expand across the world. So how do world wars begin? Honorable members of the House, world wars begin when leaders cannot or will not de-escalate, when they are trapped by inflexible promises that they have made to their populations, often promises they have made to cover up their own failures, to distract their populations from the fact they have nothing else to promise and nothing else to give. And so they choose to escalate internationally because they believe that if they fail on those promises, they will not survive as a regime. We saw this in the other two world wars. In World War I, a failing Austria-Hungary that had no idea how to deal with nationalism in the Balkans promised its population out of revenge that would subjugate Serbia, and its allies joined in the war despite seeing how this was bringing everyone else in and growing it every day. Before World War II, in World War II, Hitler promised Lebensraum to his people and was dragged and continued in to deliver that as he went east and east and east. And note, this is what, Zach, Hitler promised in his collection campaign. He said he would give Germany living space to the east, and he invaded Poland, and he invaded Russia just like he said he would. These leaders live up to their election promises. We see similar promises being made now. In Russia, we see a Putin who cannot deal with the fact, he cannot fix Russia's economic decline. He cannot fix their demographic decline. So he promises them instead he will give them Ukraine, he will give them their glory back. When we look in China, we see a government whose economy is slowing down, whose population is aging before they become rich, and who see rising youth unemployment. There is no fix to this in the model, so they promise Taiwan. And in Iran, we see an Ayatollah who has promised and failed to deliver his people prosperity, promised and failed to deliver an uncorrupt and benign theocracy, so he promises them the destruction of Israel, which he also cannot deliver. Right? This are all problems, and all of these states believe that these are all nuclear states, and they fear they will lose and their regimes will not survive if they do not deliver. These are not casual promises. These are ones the leaders believe that if the regime may fall if they cannot give. So they escalate. They send more troops to Ukraine. They try to isolate Taiwan more, and Iran puts the few resources it has in an attempt to destroy Israel. This is how escalation is happening. One moment. Yeah. We can see this escalation that's coming now. And Pradeep, and the other thing that makes this is also the inflexible leaders see this as a time for an opportunity. They believe that this is a time when they escalate to take their chance, and they miscalculate. Iran very, very recently believed the moment had finally come where they would be able to destroy Israel. They escalated, they got their proxies to escalate, and it blew up in their faces horrendously. Leaders, and that has imperiled the survival of the Iranian regime. Leaders can make mistakes. Leaders, through their inflexible promises, can be dragged into conflicts that they themselves cannot win, but they hope they can win, but they know they will not survive if they fail to deliver their promises to their populations. It is these very inflexible promises, it is this very fear of these inflexible leaders that very sadly we believe currently has us, if we do not turn, on the road to a third world war. Thank you.